one and all. Welcome to another wonderful, informative, genius level, high level consciousness raising episode of Mentally Illest Radio. This is part 2 of a series that we are doing on the work of the late Bernard Apfelbaum, who was a psychoanalyst working in Berkeley, California. Let me just turn that down for a second. Once again, welcome one and all to Mentally Illest Radio, where we are bringing to you truly valuable information that you will not find, I guarantee it, anywhere else. This is Sam, and I have my brother Jared, who I'm walking Jared through an article that I'm familiar with. And once again, this is part 2 of an episode on this article entitled Analyzing, Not Psychoanalyzing. This is an article by Bernard Apfelbaum. In part 1, I did go over a bit of the history of this individual, and it's really important that you do go back and watch that. But for the sake of our audience and doing what I would prefer, I am going to give a little bit of a synopsis that was hilariously generated by ChatGPT of the first part of the article, in which I'll have Jared come over here and listen.
I thought you were going to play.
I will play some stuff, but let me just recap the first part of the article here. In part 1, which you can find at that lovely link right here, as well as in the description of this video, I'll go ahead and read this. In part, this is ChatGPT, guys. In part 1, we asked a deceptively simple question: what actually counts as psychoanalysis? And the answer, it turns out, depends on when you ask and who is answering. By the late 20th century, psychoanalysis wasn't one unified theory at all. As Victoria Hamilton showed in interviews with practicing analysts, it had become a pluralistic field, messy, overlapping, and often internally conflicted. Analysts said they followed one theory, practiced another, and borrowed freely across traditions. But to understand how psychoanalysis got so fragmented, we had to go back to Freud and to a crisis that shaped everything that followed. This is really important stuff. Once again, we do cover this in the first episode, but the centerpiece of this essay is the what is referred to as Freud's revision of his classical theory of the psyche, which was the drive theory, or the bipartite simple conscious unconscious model, was replaced by the well-known structural model, which is tripartite, consists of 3 interacting parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. So most people don't know this, that 3-part structural modeling of the psyche was actually a revision that Freud made of his own theory of psychoanalysis. He made this revision in the 1920s, and it's the author of this article points out that it wasn't something that could have been really predicted in advance, considering how confident that Freud was about his life's work in developing psychoanalysis, how confident he was that he had basically completed his life's work in the 1910s and teens. And then, well, he changed it, and in such a radical way that even though everyone is well aware and familiar with these terms like superego and id, and even though every strain of psychoanalytic theory thinks that it understands the structural model, well, in fact, basically none of them do. And that's where the rest of this article covers is how, that failed to happen. So, and just to give you a little bit of a more context here, the reason that Freud made the revision is because of what he referred to as the negative therapeutic reaction to his therapy. Are you listening, Jared?
Mm-hmm.
We covered this in the first article, but just to recap, the negative therapeutic reaction was actually expected to occur under the classical model of analysis, in which the analyst basically insults the patient until the patient is offended, and that's supposed to happen. You can't get any progress without some kind of offense occurring in the patient. However, what's called the negative therapeutic reaction, according to Freud, is when these patients, they wouldn't just be offended, they would be deeply, deeply, deeply offended, and maybe they try to harm themselves later, or maybe they quit therapy and never come back, or perhaps they act out in some different way. In essence, Freud began to reduce, or he began to, what's it called when you get really choosy and picky about the type of person? He began to
differentiate.
Yeah, but he began to what's it called? Increase the criteria for somebody who could be a patient for psychoanalysis. He began to tighten the criteria and make it where only a specific kind of person who could actually endure psychic conflict could actually benefit from therapy. But he was dismayed to find that most people couldn't endure the kind of treatment that he was offering. That's what led to him changing his mind about it and changing actually his theory, which is surprising to think about how that works, that he actually made a revision, not just of the method, but also of his understanding of the world in a very, very theoretical context. All right, so let's go on. Let's move on. So here's the gist. Here's the gist of the revision is this. Well, maybe it'll tell us right here. Freud's major revision in the 20s flipped his original logic. Instead of repression causing anxiety, he now argued that anxiety, shame, guilt, and self-punishment causes repression. In other words, people aren't primarily driven by forbidden desires. They're driven by fear of themselves. I don't know about how it's ChatGPT chose to summarize that, but I would call it more like this. In the original model, they're like the only contents that were being repressed were sexual and violent in nature, because Freud believes those were the only antisocial, categories. Uh, but in fact, he found that one content that's repressed isn't either of those things. In fact, it's the superego, which is our relationships, which have fossilized. Our past relationships have fossilized into these internalized
Holding patterns.
internal objects or holding patterns. But essentially, it's a relationship that you have with yourself that's shaped out of past relationships, and what he was saying is that these internal relationships are the things that get repressed in the course of our fine-tuning of our behavior to be social, that we repress our internalized relationships, because they're antisocial in some way, or we find them unacceptable, or others find them unacceptable, or something like that, right? Okay, so all right, moving on. So that's what Freud found, and the goal came to be, after the revision, it was not well. Okay, the field did not understand that psychoanalysis was now to analyze
With super
ego,
analysis.
right? That superego through the analysis of transference and countertransference between the patient and the analyst. Instead, what the field took the revision to tell them was that they should basically guilt and shame their patients in a more discreet fashion. So this gets into what is called the second negative therapeutic reaction, or the second therapeutic crisis.
Response.
Yeah, most analysts. Here's what ChatGPT says about this section of the article, which we covered in part 1, by the way, guys. Most analysts continued practicing as if little had changed. Interpretations still shocked patients. Guilt and self-attack were still treated as evidence, not as problems in their own right. The result was a second unlabeled negative therapeutic reaction, this time in the profession itself. By the 1950s through the 1970s, psychoanalysis was losing credibility. Therapists accused it of being slow, moralistic, and detached from real suffering. New approaches emerged, promising faster, harder, more confrontational techniques. At the same time, analysts increasingly screened out patients deemed too fragile for analysis, those with so-called ego deficits, same shit that Freud was doing back in the day. Psychoanalysis narrowed its audience instead of rethinking its assumptions. Conflict model and responsibility. Out of this period came what's often called the conflict model, the idea that therapy works by making unconscious conflicts conscious so patients can take responsibility and choose differently. Roy Schaefer pushed this to its limit. Yeah, this is a fascinating part of the article because it gets into this. Jared, are you listening?
Yeah, I'm posting this.
All right. Well, why don't you just put your phone down for a second and listen for a second? All right, so I want you to just kind of recognize this sort of strata of thought here, this genealogical strata, or like this kind of like in historical strata, like what came first. So by the introduction of psychoanalysis at the very beginning, was this radical idea that you needed to expunge anxiety by dredging up these contents that were so unseemly and disgusting, and then it'll like, the awareness of them will cause this like relief of anxiety in the body, right? Okay, so that was this revolutionary idea. Now, later on, in the 50s through the 70s, remember New Thought, Jared?
Yeah, the Christian New Thought.
Not Christian New Thought, but
the New Thought movement. Yeah,
just the New Thought movement in general. Yeah, and like New Age, but specifically New Thought, and along with it, I mean, I always think of L. Ron Hubbard, but there's others. But people who had this charismatic magnetism. I guess, a lot of dictators also.
I thought New Thought was mainly just about like affirmation religion, like The Secret.
Yeah, so check it out. People like think of these like super crazy control freak like gurus running like cults, like New Age kind of cults and stuff, and they are pushing this idea that there's no such thing, that there's pushing this idea that basically you must take responsibility for everything, and you must take accountability for everything to an absurd degree, to the point where I mean, I'm not going to name names, but there's a family member who has literally told me that, and I know it came from this kind of acid trippy fucking like pseudo profound realization that there's no such thing as a victim. Everybody is getting exactly what they wanted and asked for.
Which is true to some extent.
I don't think it is true to some extent. I think that there's a kernel of truth in that, which is like that, yeah, like we are interacting. We're constantly, as long as you're alive, you're interfacing with reality, and so you have a say in it, right?
Yeah, you have a say in how you respond to it. Therefore, you have a say in how to direct it.
But you don't have a say in every single part of reality. That would make you God.
No, but you have every say in every part of your reality and how it directs the direction it goes.
Yeah.
From any crisis point or trauma scenario point, you can direct it in which direction from there. So like you do control the direction.
All right.
Your own direction. But you're saying that this is that this like taking full responsibility is delusional or like harmful?
It can certainly go down those routes. So that's why I found it interesting is that it sort of became, by that time, it wasn't just like you want to fuck your mother. It was also like what was it last time I said, instead of it being like that, like you want to fuck your mom, it's you're a lazy piece of shit, or you don't want to acknowledge that you're a lazy piece of shit, or something like that. Yeah.
It's your fault you were raped.
Yeah.
Basically, okay. Right?
Exactly. But also just the word really in italics, that's like the essence of id analysis. Like, you know what's really going on? That's sort of the essence of an id analytic approach, is like, here's what's really going on. Kind of like after they say what the problem is, you're like, well, here's what the problem really is. Okay, so let's continue the article now, guys. We're gonna officially begin from this spot.
So we're beginning on the second response, the second psychoanalytic response.
Yes, that's where we left off. I'm trying to find it. Okay, making sense of the negative therapeutic reaction. All right, guys. It was Kohut's genius to tinker with the classical model in such a way as to make the analyst more comfortable, less likely to feel tested, and to see the therapy as a power struggle, less called upon.
Is that still going?
No.
Okay.
Less called upon to be tough. Kohut exposed, as no one else had, the way that the classical model, and in many ways the standard dynamic model most therapists have been taught, that derives from the analytic model, makes the therapist prone to feel manipulated and tricked, facing patients who are out to defeat the therapist and sabotage the therapy. So it's like an adversarial sort of mindset. I mean, in this specific way, though, like in this way where it's like, I'm not going to let the patient get one over on me. I'm not going to be a sucker in their little game that they're trying to play with me. Like, you know, which is like kind of like a projection of like what the therapist is doing, you know. Anyway, although in the ego analytic perspective, Kohut's solution was faulty, his diagnosis of the condition which Freud had in its earlier appearance, called the negative therapeutic reaction, was dead on accurate. What had made psychoanalysis difficult to tolerate and caused widespread disillusionment with its therapeutic results was the effect of unempathic interpretations. The effect of unempathic interpretations. Kohut found just the right word. It may be no exaggeration to say that therapists were jubilant. Now it was neither weak nor naive nor a sign of boundary problems for a therapist to be empathic. However, many seemed not to know or even care what Kohut meant, and empathic essentially has come to mean that being warm and sympathetic is in itself therapeutic. For some therapists, at least, the assumption was that this meant being less analytic. The recent opposition to self-psychology is a consequence of the way empathy is misunderstood as something you give, rather than an experience that may or may not be evoked in you. The same misunderstanding plagues couple therapy. So here he's saying that Kohut's contribution in the 50s was to point out to therapists and actually be heard on this count. He was like giving credit for this, that the style of therapy at the time was giving unempathic interpretations that had negative effects. And he was saying therapists need to be empathic, that there's success with empathic interpretations, or interpretations that empathize with the patient, right? Okay, so like, and then he goes on to say that everybody misunderstood that because, well, everybody's looking for an easy way out or something, but, or everyone's stupid, maybe that's it. This is the beginning of that horrible form of therapy that we all know today, which is like, your therapist is like the slimy best friend, you know, or is like, they're going to affirm every bad thing that you tell them that you've done. They're gonna affirm everything that you do, and tell you that you can do no evil and do no wrong, and that you're perfect, right?
Is that the average therapeutic thing?
Today it is. It's gone full tilt the other way. Yeah.
What, to say that everyone else is the problem but you?
Yeah, basically to affirm their patient completely, to the point of suggesting that they like remove everyone who's negative from their life, like family and stuff. Like.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, just stay positive and eliminate all negativity and all stresses.
Mm-hmm. Kind of hit that. Anyway, yeah. So like, this is the root of that whole trend, is this misunderstanding of Kohut's contribution to therapy, which is to say that, you know, he was trying to correct it because people weren't taking into account what Freud had pointed out, you know, which is that there is something that the thing of therapeutic value stems from making the patient aware of this relationship they have with themselves. That's the therapeutic. That's the gold. That's this whole alchemical Rube Goldberg device that we have of talking about our feelings and thoughts and psyche. That the goal is to make ourselves aware of that relationship that we have with ourselves, and then give us a lot of agency in how we can do, how we can perform that relationship towards ourself. And anyway, but instead everyone wants to think that therapy is about either legalism or hyper grace, like that thing we talked about recently, where it's one of two things. It's either fix yourself, you fucking lazy fuck type of like therapy.
Everything is your fault.
Everything's your fault. Yeah, and you're gonna run 10 miles with me, and if you die, then die. Yeah. And then the other version is you can do no wrong, you're perfect, you're utterly perfect the way you are, and the goal is to align your world with that truth or whatever. Yeah. You see how it can go?
Or I guess no, that's a really confusing way of saying it, Sam.
Oh.
I would say a better way of saying it is like either you're eternally guilty or you're eternally innocent.
There you go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that it's either about full on negativity is the path to health, or it's full on ignoring negativity is the full path.
But
to
no,
health.
both of them ignore the superego though. That's the thing they both do. So Bernard Apfelbaum will patiently.
Why do you say the same misunderstanding plagues couple therapy? Because like that's how. Oh, because the couple therapy also ignores the superego, and just goes one way or the other. There's either one person that's fully to blame, and the other person's totally innocent.
Which is really grotesque if you think about it.
Like,
they're addressing this external relationship between two individuals while ignoring the internal relationships that each of them have with themselves.
Yeah. Missing the whole point basically.
Yeah. All right. Well.
And therapy is supposed to be for addressing internal problems, not just addressing external issues and behavior patterns.
That's what it's become. Is this sort of like life coach, time management, coaching and advice thing, like time and stress management. It's become a stress management thing. Stressors are what they talk about constantly in therapy now. Or like you're great, stressors are bad. Let's reduce the stressors in your life,
Or in couples therapy, let's address each individual gripe or behavioral issue that one person is having with the other person, one at a time, and blame somebody, rather than address the relationships that you guys have internally and the way that you're relating to the other person.
Yeah, exactly. So as you can see, there's like this very superficiality and facileness and glibness to modern therapy, and as well as that's the character of modern culture, guys. I don't need to tell you that. You know that everything is very, I don't know, like extremely fake and dumb, fake and gay, right, Jared? Okay. So
yeah,
you go to therapy, you're gonna get something extremely fake and gay. So let's go on. As can be seen from his seminal case of Miss F, Kohut himself believes that the analyst ultimately has to draw blood. As I discuss in detail in Ego Analysis versus Self-Psychology, he eventually pursued a line of interpretation that caused severe shock to the ego. He describes his continuing revelation to her, Miss F's, persistent infantile grandiosity and narcissism as slow, shame-provoking, and anxious. So his continuing revelation of her, of her condition to her was a slow, shame-provoking, and anxious process. Does that mean that, as Kohut conceived of it, the only way to completely avoid the negative therapeutic reaction is to avoid interpreting altogether? If the diagnosis is correct, that the problem all along has been unempathic interpretations, then wouldn't the cure be to arrive at empathic interpretations? But is that possible? Doesn't the truth hurt? Don't we all defend ourselves against knowing aspects of ourselves that we feel ashamed of, that we are afraid of, are abnormal, immoral, or immature? If those are the questions that spring to your mind, then 1, welcome to the club, and 2, you are in the grip of the logic of id analysis. He's never really this direct in addressing the reader. That's actually pretty interesting how he's like, listen, he's grabbing you by the shoulders now. The ego analytic insight is that it is these worries and reproaches about ourselves that we suffer from. What do you think about that idea, Jared? In the sense that
we suffer from the very act of analysis. Is what you're saying?
No, that he's saying that when you feel that urge to say the truth should hurt sometimes, because sometimes the thing that is true is that there's something that is abnormal, immature, or immoral about you that you should feel ashamed of, and therefore the truth should hurt sometimes. And like, everyone thinks that he's saying, and then also he's saying that's the grips, that's being in the grips of id analysis, and he's saying that the ego analytic insight is that it's these worries and reproaches that about ourselves that we suffer from, not necessarily the truth in itself. Okay, wait. So it's not the truth that we are shameful, immoral. That's not what. It's not those facts, the truth of those facts that we're suffering from. It's the like the reproaches and the worries about those facts that we suffer from.
What's the difference?
Because that would make the problem not the thing itself, but the way
we feel about it,
the way we're our mindset about it, and also paradoxically, it gives you
agency
and control.
You're saying like we suffer from our disposition toward it
and reaction,
not the thing itself.
We suffer more so from our reaction, our disposition of reaction to it.
That's somewhat accurate.
But let's go on.
But I would say mainly it's the thing itself that's making us suffer.
However, I would say you wouldn't have this persistent behavior necessarily if you had a different relationship with yourself. Like, it empowers you to not do that thing. That's what makes it not true. That it's just this inherent thing about you, is that, like, if you looked at it differently, you could see that that's not the case. But so it says this. From the perspective of id analysis, that sounds like the familiar, naive notion that we are all basically wonderful, and if we could only give ourselves a break, we would recognize that. Where are you going?
I got a
Okay, well, I'm going to take a little break with the music here, guys. Just 1 second. You're listening to Mentally Illest Radio. And keep listening. Do not touch that fucking dial, bitch. Don't do it. And we're back. We're back. We're back. We're back. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I want to zoom out a little bit more. Oh, okay, there you go.
Alrighty. I believe we were right about here. So, let me just continue.
Try to read a little bit faster.
Okay. Alright. Alrighty. It can easily seem as if the issue is whether we think that people are basically good or basically bad. As if it all depends on which existential position we take. Is it really going to be like
You
that?
just start at the beginning of the paragraph.
Okay, fine. Alright, here we go. So it's responding just to this. Okay, so the ego analytic insight is that...
No, start from the perspective.
Yeah, no, I'm going to read the last sentence in this paragraph here.
Okay.
The ego analytic insight is that it is these worries and reproaches about ourselves that we suffer from. From the perspective of id analysis, that sounds like the familiar and naive notion that we are all basically wonderful, and if we could only give ourselves a break, we would recognize that. It can easily seem as if the issue is whether we think that people are basically good or basically bad. As if it all depends on which existential position we take. But remember that negative self-talk is almost entirely silent and unheard, that the superego is largely invisible. If we fully work through that insight, then we realize that that is the problem, that the not knowing is the problem. Then it is no longer crucial whether the experiences, or if you prefer wishes, being denied, that is, defended against, and therefore either unexpressed or expressed in defended form, are good or bad. So he's saying it's no longer crucial whether those contents are good or bad. The problem is only that the person is not making the negative judgment consciously, and so does not recognize its effects and cannot find relief from them. Consider James Gilligan's Violence, in which he, as a prison psychiatrist, shows how violent men are driven by shame, something every family worker knows about battering and homicidal husbands. But these husbands don't know it. Reducing their shame would of course change them completely, and this may be what the born-again experience does for those few who experience it. But what is easy to miss is that their sense of shame is itself unconscious, and this is the surface of the problem. If they knew they felt this profound shame, they would be affected at least as powerfully as they would be if the shame itself was to somehow be relieved. That's an interesting way to look at it.
So just by them consciously reducing the cause of their violence to shame would cause relief for them?
No, he's saying if they were made aware and conscious of the fact that they were experiencing profound shame all the time, that they would be affected in at least as powerful a way as if the shame were somehow relieved or just taken away.
Or so it'd be just as powerful of an effect on
to be
them.
aware of it and conscious of it as it would be to be relieved of it. Yeah.
How so, I wonder?
So he says, these men already are that's his typo. These men already are free to be violent. Relieving their shame, not really a possible outcome, but speaking hypothetically, would make them less violent. It's kind of like what you were saying. Wait, so relieving their shame, not a possible. They feel free and shameless to be violent. So to remove or to relieve. Oh.
I would think that relieving their shame would make them more violent.
Oh my gosh, Jared. One second. Okay, so, man, I just want to. Where's that? Where's the? Thanks. Okay, so let's just read through it. Let's see if we understand it here. All right, so these men, he's talking about criminals here, are already free to
Or
be
wife beaters.
Yeah, violent men. Yeah, these men are already quote unquote free to be violent. Relieving their shame, not really a possible outcome, but speaking hypothetically, would make them less violent. And he's saying that the shame that they're constantly burdened by is what drives their violence. And that social workers know this kind of like just from experience.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Not shame of what they're doing, but shame for who they are.
Yeah, constantly being triggered and being made to feel ashamed, and then acting violently.
Yeah.
Okay, so the layering metaphor of id analysis and of mental topography makes this aspect of shame counterintuitive, but it also is true that conscious shame feels severely inhibiting, a misleading common sense experience, since shame works its effects almost entirely out of awareness. For another example of the driving power of shame, much of our sexual behavior is propelled by performance anxiety. But these last remarks are right here just a placeholder. I only want to say enough to indicate that it is entirely possible, although not easy, to arrive at interpretations that have an empathic effect. An illustration of how interpretations that are intended to be empathic may actually not have that effect, or at least may fall short, takes me to the present phase of the psychoanalytic journey. Let's keep in mind Santayana's dictum that we don't remember
that what we don't remember.
That what we don't remember we are going to repeat. That is in fact what now is happening as id analysis enters its next incarnation. Once self-psychology cracked the line that by now hardly exists in memory, object relations approaches moved in along with it, the Klein/Bion movement. The popularity of object relation concepts, especially containment and the holding environment, zoomed, and for the same reason, being empathic was such an engaging prospect. But now the status of interpretation itself was unclear. Where in the 70s analysts were beginning to suggest that not everything is conflict, now almost nothing is. It's all deficits, developmental arrests, and traumas. And to some extent, the analytic relationship is, as such, considered therapeutic. But there is also no dearth of interpretations, and in the id analytic style, they are of the naming kind, but intended to be comforting rather than unmasking. An illustrative vignette from Winnicott offers a thumbnail of this subtly confrontational id analytic approach. when a patient reported never having accepted his father's death and also developing a headache. Winnicott interpreted this as the man's need to have his head held, as would a child in distress. The patient then realized that there was no one to hold his head and to comfort him in his grief. Winnicott proposed that the correct interpretation provides a holding of the patient, which allows him to regress and be dependent on the therapist. Wow. As St. Clair, in 1986, put it, paraphrasing Winnicott, a therapist needs to understand the client in a deep way and convey that to the individual through the interpretive remark that is an interpretation of the naming kind. This followed from Klein's use of deep interpretations, which were thought to cut through ego defenses. I will get back to this one-liner approach below. Also, quote, a client needs the therapist to be omnipotent, to know and tell him what he needs and fears. The client often knows these feelings, but the crucial issue is that the therapist needs to know and say them. The client's false self and defenses may distract the therapist, and the therapist must be wary.
But the therapist?
But the therapist must be wary of this and see the central issues without being told. End quote. The patient's not wanting to know about his wish to be comforted is considered to be merely his false self interposing itself. Compare with Horny's neurotic self versus real self. Merely a cover for the wish. For more about the unintended pejorative implications of the conception of defense as merely a cover, see the shame-blame reflex. That's another article on this website. This is an attempt to reach out empathetically, but it falls short because it misses the ego, even deliberately. I will show how that is, but first let me wind up this section with a concluding paragraph. That is my review of psychoanalysis, from id analysis proper to conflict analysis to self-psychology and object relations. It has been all about what ego analysis is not, although this review is the ideal way to introduce what ego analysis is, since without psychoanalysis there would have been no ego analysis. Okay, wait, I just wanted to pause and say this, Jared. I really like how he gets into this right here, because to me it really spoke to this this sense of, I guess, offense and maybe mild insult that comes from a lot of experiences I've had in my life of somebody else trying to empathize with me, and instead of feeling comforted, I feel slightly insulted or something, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it's just like, wow, you're really not helping. You're like, ugh, like you're not.
like expressing pity instead of empathy.
Yeah.
You're getting that they feel pity for you and that they have negative judgments about what you're going through.
And like they're making these false like conclusions or assumptions. One more. But yeah, they're making like these like kind of like these false calls about things, you know. And it's like, yeah, I can't really accept your empathy when you're like making all these bad calls about me and about other things in life, or just your judgment's bad in general.
Yeah. Like we're not on the same page.
Yeah. Thanks anyway. And think about what the core of that is. It's the sense of unfeeling or unsensitivity or uncaring about the relationship that we're having with ourselves.
Well, it's pity, not empathy then, right?
Yeah. Well, because it's missing the mark of saying like...
Or sympathy, not empathy, right?
Well, I don't know if I really, really like to engage in that little...
Okay.
that little game there. I know there might be something to it, but to me it's like, fuck it, they're the same thing. But I don't know. It's like, okay, you can say sympathy is feeling bad for the circumstances that befallen somebody, or that the condition they're in, whereas
it's almost like sympathy is empathy, but without enough information, where you're making a bunch of assumptions.
People like to frame it like it's from the sympathy is from the outside, whereas empathy is getting inside their like getting in their shoes, wearing their shoes. And it's like, I don't know if I really agree with that. I feel like sympathy involves getting in their shoes as well. You can't really shed a sympathetic tear if you're not feeling for somebody, you know? So I guess I'm just...
Okay, so it's not that. It's, but yeah, it's, well, they're blaming the wrong things. And
Right.
they're they're talking about the shame blame complex reflex.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, because like I guess if you're listening to someone else's woes or someone else's gripe, the only reaction that you can have is either to listen and not offer advice.
As a human being, you're gonna have
and if you do offer
opinions,
or if you do offer
yeah.
opinions or insight at all,
and those opinions are going to inevitably be laden.
It's going to be based on blame, right?
Well, okay, for somebody who has never trained themselves to see their own internal relationship with themselves, nor see it in other people as well, like other people's relationships with themselves, that somebody who's never trained themselves to do that, their opinions, their advice and their opinions about what you should do and things like that, they're going to be inevitably laden with unconscious judgments that they have not analyzed. And the problem with them being unconscious is that they don't, because they're unconscious, they don't get to work with them on the level of like, they don't get to work with it on the level of like, I'm going to bring my full adult mind to bear on this sort of accusation being made in this courtroom setting in my mind, and I'm gonna treat it with, like, you know, with that amount of seriousness and consciousness and agency, because I'm actually aware that accusation is being waged. And instead, it usually is, it's sort of just, it's implied in the way that something is being presented as advice, that like the accusation is subtly implied, but not in a way where you can engage with it, because everyone,
it's not conscious to the speaker.
Even the person making even the person who's making the judgment isn't aware that they're making a judgment. Yeah. So it's the feeling you get when the judgment being made is coming from an assumption that hasn't been analyzed by the other person. Yeah.
Or
the problem there is, first of all, since it's being taken for granted, as almost like, this is true, so I don't have to say it, or it's so true that I don't even have to say it. I'm just gonna talk about it like it's kind of, yeah. It makes it seem as if it's unimpeachably true, first of all, and you have to fight for awareness that they're even making an accusation in the first place, sort of thing, or that you are. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, and we should just continue reading. Do you think I could have some like chocolate or something?
Oh, you want something sweet?
Yeah.
Do you mind if it's like not the best chocolate?
Not at all.
You can have the rest of this Rudolph chocolate. I don't really like it, but you can tell me what you think. And if you don't like it, then I have better chocolate. But I'll save it for myself.
Okay, let's see if this Rudolph is any good.
It's chocolate in the shape of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer from the Christmas special.
Not bad. Well, Okay.
Does it fill you with vitality?
Yeah. The Dementors can't get me now.
I know, Dementors.
Okay. Let's keep reading. Alright. The ego analytic solution. With that summary done, let's continue to think about the Winnicott vignette. Note that the analyst must avoid being distracted by the patient's defense in order to get directly to the patient's experience. The ego analyst reverses this rule. From the ego analytic point of view, what distracted Winnicott was that this man's wish to be comforted. What distracted Winnicott was this man's wish to be comforted, and what Winnicott was distracted from was the patient's shame about it. Characterizing his defense as false is itself a sizable distraction. That, in a nutshell, is the difference between ego analysis and id analysis. I should make clear what a naming interpretation refers to here. It means pointing to a content. Quote, "You really miss your father and wish he was here to comfort you." End quote. It is intended to cut through defense, the patient's feelings and attitudes about the content. An ego analytic interpretation points to the patient's feelings and attitudes about the content, the patient's relationship. An ego analytic interpretation points to the patient's feelings and attitudes about the conflict, about the content.
The patient's relationship to the content.
Thank you. You feel like it's immature to still need your father, like I would never have such a need. It is not simply naming. But don't go away, there's more to be explained here. First, Winnicott's interpretation could well be relieving. This man would feel sympathized with and also relieved of his shame. This is not id analysis in the old unmasking sense. If you check out the Alexander case in vignettes, it should be clear that the patient would not feel sympathized with. He was being caught dead to rights. And in A Key to Where the Bodies Are Buried in Psychoanalysis, there's Freud refusing to be sympathetic, manipulated. Winnicott seemed to be genuinely kindly and in no way paranoid about being manipulated. He was a very benevolent id analysis.
So he was a very benevolent analysis. Yeah.
His was a very benevolent id analysis.
Yeah.
What is nice about the object relations approach for the comparative purposes is that it controls for the less crucial flaws of id analysis. The patient is not to be kept in a state of deprivation. See below for more on this, about this. Nor is there any sense of ripping aside the mask. In Winnicott's terms, the false self is simply bypassed as irrelevant. There are two considerations here. One is whether the man's shame actually was relieved, and the second is how that is not the point anyway. First, the patient could still think he was being childish, but that Winnicott was being a kind and tolerant man, which he undoubtedly was. If so, the relief would not be generalizable. Also, the patient might subsequently think he shouldn't worry about being childish, and could be ashamed of still being ashamed, perhaps especially when he was with Winnicott. Ashamed of being ashamed. But what is more crucial for this man is to be able to generalize from this experience to his relationship to himself. He felt ashamed and as a result had a headache instead of a wish. So what is really important is not the shame or the wish, but that both were not in his awareness. What would really produce psychological growth in this man would be to develop the mental set in which he would be fully capable of being aware of feeling ashamed of missing his father's comforting presence. This level of analysis is so superficial that it is deep. Neither common sense nor psychoanalysis prepares you for it, although Finichel argued that the analyst should interpret as close to the surface as possible. I want to read that previous sentence again. What would really produce psychological growth in this man would be to develop the mental set in which he would be fully capable of being aware of feeling ashamed of missing his father's comforting presence. Okay, I can follow that.
Being aware of feeling ashamed.
And being capable of being aware of being ashamed. Not just being aware of it, being capable of being aware of it. Or like we were talking about...
Being aware of being capable of being aware.
Enjoying being aware of it.
Okay.
Okay. For this man to be able to experience both the wish and the shame about it would mean that he was able to have a more intimate relationship with himself. The ego analyst might say, "It looks like you are ashamed of wanting to have your head held, just as at your age you feel like you shouldn't be missing or needing your father." This interpretation would be followed up with a later date by, "You now feel like you shouldn't be ashamed. You shouldn't feel ashamed, like it's neurotic or I wouldn't approve of it." This man would have had the sense all along that he was ashamed of having this wish. But it could be called preconscious or even unconscious conscious thoughts and feelings of which we are aware but not conscious. Aware but not conscious.
Unconscious conscious?
Or preconscious.
What the fuck?
Being aware of something but not conscious of it.
Okay, yeah. I guess, yeah. Like you're aware that you feel ashamed, but you're not conscious and acknowledging. So one is just being aware, and the other one is acknowledgement. Okay.
It's almost like consciousness is like reflection.
Okay, yeah.
It's like a rescanning of the content from like a reflective, like a.
Oh, there's a duck over on that pond. I am aware.
Yeah.
I now know that I am conscious of that duck.
Yeah. Yeah.
I acknowledge that I am conscious of the duck.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Or to use another cognitive science distinction, thoughts and feelings that are conscious but not in the flashlight beam of attention. What follows may be overkill, but I am moved to include another vignette here from Hannah Siegel, 1967, one of the original Kleinians. It has the virtue of being straight up Klein, in that Siegel attempts a deep transference interpretation in the first hour of a training analysis. This man spoke of his determination to be certified as an analyst as soon as possible. He also talked about his digestive troubles, and at one point mentioned cows. These associations established the theme of the hour for Siegel. Her interpretation was, "I am the cow, like the mother who breastfed you. You think you are going to empty me greedily, as fast as possible, of all my analysis milk."
So you're saying like they felt like they were being milked by the analyst?
No, by the patient.
Oh, this is the analyst?
Wait, let me just make sure. Training analysis. So her patient was going to be an analyst, or an analyst. Her patient was training to be an analyst.
Okay.
So she felt like her patient was trying to just drain her of all her analysis milk.
Oh, was milking her of her analytic analytic techniques.
Yeah, her know-how and her
like mirroring her analytic mannerisms.
Mm-hmm.
Or analytic methods.
Uh-huh. Alright. Let me quickly interpose a citation from Hamilton's survey, the one I cited at the outset. One informant commented that Americans say it is crazy to interpret transference the moment the patient walks into the room. The Kleinian's rejoinder being the long-standing joke about Americans' fear of interpreting the transference. Okay. Interesting. So, back to the story. Siegel added that her interpretation immediately brought out the material about his guilt in relation to exhausting and exploiting his mother. Kernberg, 1979, offered an ego-psychological critique of this interpretation, in which his only reservation was that it may have been too deep, neglecting the patient's character defenses, thus leading to intellectualization. Oh. 1 second.
Eating that chocolate.
Yeah.
Chocolate. Eating that chocolate. Good old sweet chocolate in your mouth. Melting like milk chocolate down your throat. All the chocolate
that's
you
good, Rudolph.
could ever want. Chocolate.
Rudolph, the red-nosed chocolate reindeer.
That's the eating chocolate song.
Yeah. All right. What makes this little drama interesting, and perhaps not merely overkill, is what looks like Siegel's trained incapacity, or to use a sociological term, to notice that this poor man, who just is dying to be an analyst and to soak up Siegel's wisdom, feels accused of being rather nasty, exploitive, and a drag. Even without the pathos of his confirmatory association, it seems obvious enough that analysis milk does not sound like something you should want, especially not greedily, as contrasted with analysis. And his association makes it sound as if she did not say this to him with a smile. He heard her saying, "You should be ashamed of yourself. Can't you be a little more considerate?" His retort should have been, "Look, if it is going to take that much out of you, I feel less greedy already." That's funny. But I should not get too carried away. This man undoubtedly knew that Kleinians say these things to people all day long. You shouldn't take it too personally. Here's much the same interpretation from Erich Fromm, at least as reported in Seminar Notes by Landis, 1981. Quote, "You feel that you have to treat me gently and nicely because that's how you'll get what you need. Actually, you'd like to devour me, but you're afraid that if I knew that, I'd be angry." From another record of his lectures comes this version. "You are really afraid of me because you don't want me to know that you want to eat me up." Again, it doesn't sound like you should want to devour or eat up your therapist. Does eating me up, num num num, sound like a good thing or a bad thing? Okay. But Fromm probably did not think he was expressing disapproval, and might well have insisted that what he said should not be taken that way. By the way, it is an interesting sidelight on patients from Fromm's, that Fromm's patient undoubtedly did not say, "No, do you really think so? That makes me feel terrible," or even, "Do you think that's bad?" And certainly not, "Dr. Fromm, when you say devour, what exactly do you mean?" It requires an ego-analytic approach to bring out such reactions. For another pointed contrast with the ego-analytic approach, let's go back to my citation from Blanc and Blanc. Blanc and Blanc. Remember their discussion of therapist responsiveness, in which they declared that if the borderline patient asks a question, the analyst answers, whereas, in contrast, the intact ego can tolerate Oh, I see. So yeah, if the borderline patient asks the question, the analyst answers, whereas in contrast, the intact ego can tolerate unresponsiveness for the sake of elaborating fantasies. This refers to the rule of frustration, according to which, if needs are not gratified, the patient will regress to more primitive developmental stages, signified by the fantasies that emerge. This wild and romantic notion emerged from Freud's experience with hypnosis, in which the patient's own interpretation of what was going on was not part of the action. Freud even moved to the pressure method to treat patients who were not hypnotizable. He thought that pressing on their forehead, they were still in the recumbent position, might be an alternative way of bringing out repressed contents.
Does that work? Press harder.
Since this also was the period in which he reported finding that his patients revealed a surprising number of rape and incest experiences, it has been suggested that these reflected this experience with Freud. Is he saying he brought out all those memories by pressing on foreheads? I don't know. However this may be, the analyst did not consider all the ways the patient might think and feel about this unresponsiveness. The ideal of the time was what Glover called the mutative response, or the mutative interpretation, a one-liner more or less, that exploded on the patient's mind, much like dramas in which characters are told something about themselves that suddenly and conclusively shatters their illusions. This interpretation was to be a thing of art that incorporated a childhood reconstruction and a transference repetition into a single intervention. The analyst waited for the opportunity to arise, asking no questions, making no other comments, certainly no "I see" or "uh-huhs." This is at the farthest remove from ego analysis. The analyst magisterially assumed that what the patient thought about his austere presence was simply noise. The patient silently thought while free associating, "Geez, is this what you have to do? Is this what you have to go through to get analyzed?" The patient might also think that the analyst acted reserved as a mark of his professional status, or even because he just was a reserved guy. When the patient found this austerity maddening, he or she would talk to friends about it and be told to hang with it. It's the drill. Nevertheless, the patient would at times feel hurt and rebuffed, even condescended to, silently, while free associating. So it looked like any relationship, two people, each in their own world. When the analyst finally let loose with his presumably bullseye interpretation, the patient would silently try to figure out what a patient was supposed to do with it. What made this approach possible was the analyst's sense of speaking directly to the patient's unconscious, listening to the patient's stream of talk for confirmatory reactions that interpretations kicked up. There was no exchange with the patient, who soon learned that interpretations were not to be hashed over. The patient could experience the freedom of not having to genuflect, not having to enact the usual social niceties, but at the same time, this mimicked an ordinary relationship in which people are unaccustomed to thoughtful give and take. The Blancs did convey the conventional wisdom of the time that with a borderline patient, the analyst was not austere, since in borderline structures, failure to respond constitutes abandonment analogous to the unavailability of the mother in the separation individuation phase. It is central to the conflict model that the patient either has an intact ego or a fragile one, and this is your guideline for how deeply you can interpret. If you interpret too deeply with patients whose ego is fragile, they may decompensate, which seemed true, and many analysts told horror stories at the time. But what was true was that the more disturbed the patient, the more sensitive and the more likely to feel attacked, condemned, or frightened by unempathic interpretations, being miner's canaries, as it were, since more intact patients were more able to take their medicine. In contrast, the whole ego analytic focus is on ego sensitivity, and you interpret even more deeply with so-called fragile patients. But this is getting too abstract. The crucial ego analytic point is that therapists too quickly assume that there is no way to talk about an experience. Maybe I shouldn't say too quickly, since the established psychoanalytic position limits what can be talked about, and because there is no adequate conception of the ego. Whoa. It is not just that the classical analyst was supposed to be the strong silent type, at least in the American version. In this regard, relational and intersubjective analysts make it a focus of their approach to not be autocratic and not to assume that the analyst is always right. This avoids the posture of infallibility while preserving in its essentials the model that gives rise to it. For a discussion of a man treated from this model,
For a discussion of a case
treated from this model, see the third of the 4 analyses in the 2 analyses of Mr. Z plus 2. The paradigm is much too simple, too undifferentiated, to generate a way to talk to a patient about the experience the Blancs speak of, feeling abandoned by the therapist's unresponsiveness. In this explanatory model, the experience of feeling abandoned is treated as determined by unconscious forces, when the patient is conscious of
what the patient is conscious
what
of.
the patient is conscious of is just a cover, a defense. Thus, borderline structures are seen, as by the Blancs, simply as a form of ego deficit, and hence as not analyzable, only repairable by corrective experience or just something that the therapist has to work around. The trouble with this conception is that if you think it is true, you have no way to find out that it isn't. Here's how the same problem, a patient's seeming inability to cope with analytic reserve, looks in the ego analytic perspective. It is likely that such patients think they are not supposed to feel abandoned. They might well feel ashamed of being so vulnerable. It also is likely that they would expect the analyst to be offended if this feeling is expressed. Further, they probably expect that to express feeling abandoned would be taken by the analyst as a demand, or worse, as a complaint, not an unreasonable expectation. Given this expectation, the patient may already be angry, hence could only express it as an attack or a demand, and this would feel too dangerous. Any or all of this could be readily recognized by the patients or brought to their attention, as well as relieving to have it anticipated and understood.
Why is there so much emphasis on all this anxiety created from just remaining silent when somebody is expressing themselves or expressing something to the analyst?
Well, he's using that. The reason he's focusing on that is because he's using that as a case study. It's like there's this applies to like infinite number of scenarios, but he's using just this one.
And to explain what again?
The difference between an id analytic interpretation and an ego analytic interpretation in therapy, because he's saying that like the id analyst feels like they have to manage this patient's like reactions in order to deliver therapy to them, whereas the ego analyst realizes that the whole point of the therapy and the thing they're delivering to them is something useful about how they're like acting right now in this moment. You know what I mean? Like, oh, so that they seem to be really needing me to say something every 5 seconds to affirm them. Well, instead of the id analyst being like, okay, I'm gonna say something every 5 seconds so that I can deliver you therapy, you know, like like let's deal with this problem, and then I can do what I was.
The ego analyst
It's
says,
like, let's talk about why you're
let's
doing
bring
this.
this
Yeah.
let's bring this to your attention.
Yeah.
So that because that might be the root
Yeah.
of your problem.
Yeah.
So it's basically pointing out somebody's whether or not they have a vulnerable ego or not.
But look how he says it.
Pointing out somebody.
If you just
whether
said to them, you have a vulnerable ego and you can't stand somebody not responding to you. That like obviously that would like be like really hurtful, right? Or it'd be offensive, right? Like
yeah.
Okay, so listen how that's different than what the interpretation. And also, I hope you can see how it's not exactly true. That to say it's not true to say you have a vulnerable ego and you can't stand not being listened to for 5 seconds or not being responded to for 5 seconds, because in fact he's saying it's likely that such a patient would strongly feel that they're not supposed to feel abandoned. They're not supposed to feel like that sense of abandonment every 5 seconds that they feel.
So the fact that they feel that they're not supposed to means that they maybe don't have a sensitive ego. Because
I think they probably do have a sense of ego, but it's the reason it's wrong just to say you have a sense of ego, you can't stand being not responded to for 5 seconds.
It's because they already know it. They already know that they're not supposed. They're not supposed to feel that way.
The full problem is that they know that about themselves, and they know they shouldn't be that way, and they know they So like the full problem is that they're having this internal drama with themselves, or this conflict with themselves, and this letting themselves down and stuff. And
so the point of bringing this drama to their attention is to have them address the relations that they have with themselves.
Yeah.
And this is a perfect way to bring their attention to it. Is the very fact that they are treating themselves in such a way when they feel that they aren't supposed to be responding in a way that they're supposed to. They're saying, look at the way that you're responding to yourself. That's the root, is how you are relating to yourself.
Yeah.
In it when you feel that you're not supposed to be reacting in a way that you're expected to.
Yeah.
That's actually that. Yeah, I have to. Before we continue, I have to pee real quick.
Okay, we're gonna take a little break, guys.
Well, it's like 2 minutes.
go ahead and continue reading now that we're all settled in.
Sorry, guys. I might have to pee a couple more times because I'm drinking beer. And you know how it is when you drink beer.
Nope, that's just you.
It just means that we're going to be taking a couple breaks.
Pretty sure that's just you, Jared. Nobody else has ever experienced that. All right. Pick up where I left off here. Here's how the same problem.
I just wanted to really quick tell about the little conversation we had during the break. I asked Sam. It seems like that the ego analyst, which he's differentiating from the id analyst, is really a super ego detective. Or I was asking why isn't he called a super ego analyst?
Yeah.
And I guess it's because he's under the guise of ego analysis. He's trying to detect the relationship, the super ego relationship, or the relationship you have
between the ego and the superego.
Between the ego and the superego, and trying to bring consciousness and awareness, the patient's consciousness and awareness, to that relationship. So, like, why isn't he called a super ego analysis then?
Yeah, and
or a super ego analyst.
I'm hoping that reading the rest of this article will be a good primer for us to actually discuss what the ego is, which is like an overlooked sort of conversation, or at least it's not overlooked. A lot of dumb conversations happen about it, you know. Like,
oh yeah.
So
you need to kill the ego.
Yeah.
Ego death.
Yeah. A lot of really, really just very wooey, you know, conceptions of the ego, and it's ill-fated because people don't read, you know, like where these words came from, which is sort of like Freud's theory and stuff. So we're reading about that, and we'll be better equipped by the end of this to talk about the ego, you know, in depth. I find it really fascinating just how this changes my understanding of the structural theory of like, okay, it's not just like this. It's not just the shit they show you in a textbook. It's not like, it's like, and it's funny. What I find infinitely fascinating, why I always come back to this, Jared, is that the mechanism that it describes is the very same mechanism that causes itself to not be detected.
Yeah, no, I find it's really crazy how, like, it just hits me over and over again how fucking crazy this concept is. That when you talk about the superego or the ego, these things seem like on the surface to be very straightforward, simple. This is this and this is that. But then it's like, no, you don't know what it really is. Like you like a lot of people like no, that's not what it is.
Exactly. Now let me just say the thing I find so interesting about that is that there's a mechanism being described in this article, which is the thing that both is what Freud was trying to account for in the structural 3-part model, and it's also the very thing that causes people to misunderstand or bypass and completely misunderstand the model itself and talk about it glibly and superficially, you know, Jared?
But at the same time, on top of that layer, that's the craziest thing about it, is it's like, it's simple. No, it's not simple. You don't know what it really is.
Yeah.
But then when you actually do know what it is actually that simple.
Yeah.
I'm like,
so you're incorporating that relationship with yourself.
It's because all of this therapy and all of these explanations are meant to bring you into the awareness of the relationship you have with yourself, basically.
Yeah.
And that's something so hard
There's
to comprehend for people. Like, it sounds so easy. Oh, the relationship you have with yourself.
No.
And it's like, oh, okay, well then,
even words, even putting it in those words is like this trap for just like bypassing thought. It's a thought terminating cliche, as they call it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're supposed to actually be paying attention to your psychic reactions to your thoughts and to your emotions to your thoughts.
Yeah.
You feel emotions to thoughts, and and so often than not you bypass
But here's
the reaction, the emotional response and reaction you have to the thoughts that you have directed at your thoughts.
Why are we
the thoughts about your thoughts have an
trained?
emotional reaction that you don't want to acknowledge.
Why are we so trained to bypass? And another way to put it is like, I think the more appropriate way to put it is like this. That's the natural state, is to bypass. And why haven't we learned to these habits of catching and detecting the things that we're always bypassing? Think about like how, you know how on acid there's this huge torrent of visual information going through your eyes at all times, and your brain filters out a great deal of that until only maybe a fraction of it, like 1% of it, is going through to create the image that you're seeing, right? So and when you take acid, for example, that filter is kind of like reduced. Like you start to, more of that what's considered by your brain to be noise that's filtered out, more of it gets starts to come in and stuff.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, that's a crazy concept.
So,
that's like when you look out into the world with your eyeballs,
your brain
how
is
much is your brain ignoring
yeah
to see the objects in front of you? How much noise?
That's a classic,
how much noise is your brain?
Example,
That's some crazy. That's a crazy.
That's like Aldous
concept.
Huxley, I think. But so it's like Doors of Perception. I think it talks about that. But how it applies here is that it's like this: your body is like designed to reduce and filter this torrent of visual signal, right? In order to make it legible to you. But perhaps maybe you want to decide that maybe you want to have agency about what you're filtering out, or what you decide what you want to detect or not detect, or something like that. Maybe you want to have that power, that agency to do that.
Maybe you want to designate the noise as an object to see.
Yeah, like, okay, so that's just like, yeah, maybe you want to have
the noise that you would typically reduce to see real objects. You want to make a mental object to see.
What you would need to do that is you'd need to have a tool or a method at your disposal, in order to augment the way that your body naturally does something. And in the same way, in psychoanalysis or ego analysis, what he's saying is that our psyche naturally filters out the superego. That's like a central insight of ego analysis, Jared.
To protect the ego, right?
Something like that. Well, maybe it protects.
Yeah. Why does it?
For the same reason the eye filters out information. It's like to make things legible to us, to make an understandable image to us, or something.
Yeah. No, yeah, because if you look at the if you look at the formula, you won't be able to focus on the solutions. I'm saying in a mathematical equation, basically, like if you if you focus too much on how a food is prepared, you won't be able to define what a food is.
Yeah.
Like if you're trying to define this object is a food placed in front of me, and then you start thinking too hard about all the ingredients of what comprises that food, it's going to get in the way of you defining this thing in front of you.
Yeah.
So like, but if you wanted to take back control, it's super psychedelic and like kind of mind melting to but it's not.
But think about that central insight for a second. That it really is like, whoa, we just discovered something about man, hitherto for unacknowledged about man, which is this: something about our nature, about our instinct, compels us to ignore and dismiss the superego in day-to-day life.
We must ignore the superego to function and to continue to perceive object by object and have relations to object by object and to have definitions and define and like this one thing to this object, this one thing to that object, this one thing to the next object.
Yeah.
And that process of our daily life of identifying and interacting with one object at a time bypasses the conscious awareness of the process by which we interact.
Now, Jared, I want
to with each individual object. It must for us to even be able to interact with objects, but to take a break from that process would be to interrupt that process. You would literally interrupt.
You would shake things quite a lot.
You would interrupt the process of identification and relation.
It feels a little bit icky and gross
to
and
external
to do it. That's why what I was going to say, Jared.
It does. It really does.
There's another name by
it does feel icky and gross.
There's another name by which this is called. This process of training, giving yourself a method and tool to train yourself to be able to notice and recognize and detect and not forget and let slip out of your hands the superego, and it's called shadow work. Like, that is literally, I think they're kind of synonymous.
Yeah, I would say super ego awareness.
Except here's the thing, Jared.
Super ego consciousness.
Here's my critique.
And by super ego, we mean the relationship you have to yourself and your inner monologue, or your inner responses to the emotional and reactions that you have to your thoughts, or to any object.
Here's the trap.
Any object,
Here's
mental objects.
Here's the trap.
Mental concepts.
We discussed this a lot
and beliefs
last time. Yeah, we discussed this a lot last time, and I want to say the name shadow work, Jared. The name shadow work gives you a little clue here. Okay, remember last time we were talking about how Freud understood the need to not peg everything as a repressed id content, that not everything is about sex or violence. Actually, at the end of the day, some things are about the relationship we have with ourselves. That content's being repressed, and in fact, he found, it's actually mostly that. Obviously, there.
Yeah.
So
The sex and violence are the ways that we can, in our physical bodies, express these emotions and feelings and thoughts that are unresolved. But ultimately, there are reactions to inner things that are happening inside of us that we can't respond to physically.
Right. But why?
But we respond to what we do respond to, though. We're just unaware of those responses unless we train ourselves to become
the
aware.
reason I said shadow work, the name shadow work is a clue, okay, is because of this, Jared. Shadow work, at least in its, I would say in its greatest, in its most popular form, okay, in its most most popularly understood form, Jared. Shadow work is id analytic. Because it acknowledges...
Or is it ego analytic?
No, it's id analytic. Here's why. It does acknowledge this great insight that we're constantly filtering out this important thing that's happening in our psyche, or this fact, or this reality of our it's not, that's the thing, it falls short. It doesn't, it stays in the id analytic. Because maybe it does try to recognize the superego and the relational things that we have inside ourselves, but because the name is shadow work, people are going to reduce those relational objects to the sex and violence and taboo contents of the id, every time, because they think they have to, they think they're supposed to, they think.
Well, it's not just sex and violence, it's about the objectively negative because of the harmful effects it has with others. like because it has to do with your relation to others, which directly relates to the relation inside that you have with yourself, which is fossilized relation to others. That's why. That's why it's related.
People do have to confront those id contents in them. That's for sure, right? However, that's not the end game, and that's not the only thing, and it's not the most important thing either. You get past that, and you're like, no, actually, the thing that's more interesting, because it's so incredibly dynamic, is the relationship that we have with ourselves, because that's the thing that sticks with us and aids and assists us, or is our problem and our burden, like all the time.
I could even argue, Sam, I could even take it even further and argue that like your soul is manifested as a physical being with a mind that has brain chemistry that's computing like a computer in linear time for a reason. That's the reason why we're here, is because under those particular conditions, which were designed to stimulate and help the soul, we're here too. That's our main fucking directive, is to look at and to choose consciously the way that we relate to ourselves, because that's the relationship that we're going to take with us after this life. That's literally the reason why we're here in this life, is to, you could make the argument that far, is to say that we're here in this physical flesh being that has a mind that computes with brain chemistry in linear time, is to stimulate the soul into coming to this realization so that we can advance our souls to take with us past this life. That's why we're here, to take that with us. That's why when you kill yourself, it has such a great and such a devastating impact, because of these samskaras, or like these impressions, these fossilized relations that you have to yourself and inside yourself, to others that reflect inside of yourself, that also reflect outward to others, which create experiences to then reflect inside to, I'm just saying, it's like a self-perpetuating mirror. And to take awareness, it's seriously like looking into a mirror when you close the mirror and you see like a million faces in the mirror. It's like looking at literally like this uncomfortable realm with yourself, and you're looking in a reflection of outward to inward to outward to inward, and you have to take you can change the reflection from inside. You can change the external reflection of the outward relationship to inward relationship to outward relationship to like, it's literally like a reverberating echo that echoes forever, and you change the frequency of the echo forever.
Well, I see it like you're giving yourself the ability, you're learning the ability to like actually adjust that mirror in like inside, and like be able to like catch the light source by adjusting the mirror, and it's like boom, now it's fucking shining out into the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
okay. Yeah.
that kind
because
of thing.
There is a right way. There is a correct method.
Yeah.
Right. So you are trying to catch the light. That's the whole idea of shadow work, is to look at where the light is hitting you and it's leaving a shadow on the ground when it should shine right through you.
It's all about giving that agency. That's what
Right.
he's talking about, giving the agency to the patient to see what's going on, see it clearly, and then they'll be able to make the adjustment in themselves. But let's keep going here.
I have to pee real quick.
Oh my gosh.
Real quick. I'm sorry again. I'm sorry.
Oh my goodness. All right.
Sorry about that.
Every time. Every time. Okay. Sorry, I lost my place. What?
When I was younger, growing up, I used to have a problem of saying everything twice. For some reason, like I was like mentally retarded. I would say something and then I would say it again to myself. I'd be like, oh, I'd say it again and then I'd say it to myself. I'd say it again and then I'd say it to myself. Hey, can I get a bowl of cereal? Do you have a spoon? Hey, can I get a bowl of cereal? Can you have a spoon?
Yeah, hey Jared, come over here, buddy. I want to talk to you about something. Yeah, go ahead and sit down. I want to tell you something. It's something I want to think you should know. Did anybody sit you down and tell you that you did that?
No. Oh, no. What the way I found out is that my friends just started making fun of me. And I'd be like, "Oh, haha."
That's healthy.
I mean, yeah.
I think it is healthy.
It is healthy, actually. Yeah,
That's
I learned
good.
how to.
That's good.
I became self-aware of it.
It's so incredibly useful, and the utility of that.
The utility of mockery.
Yeah.
To tell us like, oh, I'm doing something that I'm unaware of.
Uh-huh.
But it's very similar though. The whole like talking outward to other people and then talking inward to yourself.
Yeah. But it's funny how you know, like it's not a regular thing. People, most people do not do that when they're a kid. I certainly didn't. I didn't say things twice. That's funny because I definitely have that. It's relatable to be mulling over something and ruminating over something, and like even after you say it, you're saying it again to yourself in your head and stuff. But like, no, I never like had that verbal tick. Like we were laughing about that because it's pretty funny because it's like telling on the way that people are though, which is that before and after you say something, you are like pondering it and like mulling over it and shit. Anyway.
No, but not everybody, dude. It just goes to show that I was born awake in some capacity. Whereas, which probably means that this is probably not my first time here. You know, maybe why I was born with a certain disposition to like, want to kill myself. Maybe, I had a previous life where I actually did.
Everyone wants to kill themselves at some point, Jared. But some people do fucking really
come in with a disposition,
obsess about it their
whole
ass life. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's like it really does. I'm pretty sure you can literally like fuck up your soul's path, like if you do it too many times. It becomes an echo that like is like almost impossible to overcome because it's like 5 times repeated or some bullshit. You know what I mean? Versus like maybe you still have a chance. Yeah. Maybe 3 strikes you're out actually means something. I don't know, but I just think that maybe some people come into this life as a first timer, and some people come into this life maybe as a second timer or a third timer. Okay.
I just don't believe in the reincarnation thing. I understand like kind of how it intuitively feels true and stuff, but my thing is that there are other things that explain those differences in people much more to my liking. you know, like one of them is simply this, just that, you know, like we're fearfully and wonderfully made by God. Therefore, like each one of us has very like special and unique properties and characteristics and so forth that are like totally determined by a divine source in a way where it's like even you aren't like gonna be able to like to um, fully know yourself, because that would require godlike omniscience to know yourself because you were made by God. Like that's the cool thing about it.
Well, you're not, I mean, you don't. I mean, no, but you don't know yourself with godlike omniscience. You know yourself from a flesh body with a biochemical computer, and in linear time, experiencing time in a linear fashion, and over time, you build a knowledge. You build a knowledge, and your knowledge is a large part of your disposition toward the truth, right?
Definitely. But the other thing that was this is like, yeah, you mentioned your biology. So yes, you're made by God, and the thing that is us is not entirely.
We have self-knowledge. We just don't have godlike, omniscient self-knowledge. But we, over time, develop a relationship to the truth and a relationship to ourselves and what we know about ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? So,
but what I was gonna say is that like reincarnation, I think, is trying to explain personality and differences in people, and like the astrology does the same thing. I was a victim of astrology. What else? But there's things in science that do that, like IQ. A lot of people fixate on IQ, and I think there is like something to IQ, but it's also like, how the fuck does IQ tests work? I bet there's some.
There's basically a couple categories, but it's your ability to retain attention.
Yeah.
It's your attention span. It's literally, that's what it is. It's your attention span. That's what your IQ is.
Anyway, I've heard it argued that IQ is the best quantitative metric. Like it's called the psychometric, which is, you know, like in psychology, which is a soft science. Very sad, you know, kind of state of affairs in soft sciences is that there's no reproducibility because of the fact that we are God created creatures that are just so incredibly elusive to study. But what I'm trying to say is this: in psychology, everyone says that IQ is like the most empirically validated and real solid thing that we can measure in a person that endures and stays the same over the course of their life. You know, like what? Like, but then I say to that, like, who the fuck are the people who make the IQ tests? Like, I want to see on the ground how this actually works, because to me it's like I gotta see it.
Have you ever taken an IQ test?
No, I've actually never taken an IQ test.
Damn, that's crazy. I took one once.
When?
When I was in 8th grade. And it's basically like they
Where?
At that one school that Dad sent me to. That ghetto school. Remember?
Do you think it was a ghetto IQ test?
No, there was somebody else came in. They hired somebody else, the IQ tester.
So it was probably...
Came into the school to give IQ tests to the students.
Okay.
And so we were taken into a private office, and we were given basically different tests, basically. I remember one of the tests was like, you were given like 5 or 6 cards up to... They did it first they did it with 3 cards, and they did it with 5 cards, and they did it with 10 cards to see how well you were able to look at the pictures and put the pictures in the proper order so that it was a coherent sequence of events. So like if they're measuring your ability to remember and to keep record and to transfer what you remember over to other things.
What's that game called where you're trying to find the matches? There's a bunch of cards that are face down. You're trying to find the matches. Like you turn over 2 cards. If they match, you remove them. But if they don't, you replace them. I mean, you just put them back down.
Yeah.
Face down.
That's one example, a remembering game.
Yeah.
But they were high. They were more advanced.
More
Yeah,
advanced
you know what
than
would have been
that, yeah.
crazy is if fucking if Mario, if Nintendo, they're like,
Was measuring on IQ.
was doing IQ like style testing to cue people to take IQ tests to increase IQ scores.
Yeah.
They could easily have done that.
Yeah.
You know, like level 2, they have the regular memory testing game, but then at world 8 they have an advanced sequence that you have to memorize.
Yeah, we're getting off track. Anyway, all I was gonna say is that
or put in order like IQ style. Another one was like taking shapes and seeing if you were able to see them from different.
Yeah.
And like see if you're able to like look at things upside down and still recognize
Here's
shapes.
something that I kind of believe in that's hard to quantify about that actually explains things like why you're different than other people. Is this, Jared? It's like family culture or family and tradition on a family level, which is like hard to see in modern society. It's really hard to see because everyone is really just like blended together in this way. But going back, it's no accident that you came from your father. It's deterministic actually, and the same goes for him, and so on. Where there's this unbroken deterministic chain of you coming from your specific lineage of people, right, Jared? And like we are talking about sort of like reincarnation, but in a different way. It's like this, Jared.
You're talking about genetics?
No, more like it's more on a spiritual level or a psychic spiritual level, which is this. It's like you. On some level, you do really embody your ancestors. Like in the Bible, like the way they talk about it back then, and the way God refers to it is that like.
When you talk about ancestors, you mean like
you're
talking about the photo. What do they call it? What do they call it? The morphinogenic fields. Morphinogenic fields. So like just like how I would think that all of humanity has the same morphinogenic field and we all share the same memory bank, but I don't necessarily agree with the idea that but maybe there is something to that based on certain people's genes, the building blocks from where they came from, you embody the morphogenogenic memory banks or libraries that your people left for you, basically. But I would think that would be all of humanity. I think that everybody has access to the morphogenic fields of all of humanity, not just their fucking race.
Well, no, like your like that's I'm talking about like just your father and mother and their father and mother and their father and mother. There is this like wild blending that's going on, but at the same time, there's like, what am I trying to say here? It's that it's not because you reincarnated, it's because your father begat you.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. No. Yeah. I get what you're saying, but you're saying that you have ancestral memories even though it's your first time?
Something like that. I don't like necessarily ancestral memories or generational curses or whatever.
Okay.
I don't necessarily like that kind of. But
okay, I mean, okay, whatever, fine. Past lives, or you have ancestral memory. Okay, that's a really ancestral memory is actually a really funny, counter response to
reincarnation.
To reincarnation. Yeah, it wasn't me.
Exclusive.
It was just the memories I inherited.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, they're not exclusive. A lot of cultures affirm both of those ideas.
Yeah, but I mean, that's actually a pretty funny like like argument against. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, I
a
was trying to
that's
make it.
hilarious.
Okay.
You can easily that's a pretty legitimate argument
Reincarnation.
against reincarnation.
I was
Yeah.
trying to make it. Well, okay, let's keep reading this. I'm getting a little tired. Maybe another like 30 minutes, Jared, or to an hour or something.
Yeah, for sure. We're probably gonna have to do a part 3.
I know. I already named it 2 out of 3. Like I was pretty much
Okay.
yeah, certain of that. Just want to make sure we're actually streaming here.
Hey, what the fuck? How do you exit out of that? I'm just kidding.
I really hope it's not playing in some tab. Okay, it looks like it's gone. So, alright, so it is not just that the classical analyst was supposed to be the strong silent type, at least in the American approach version. In this regard, relational and intersubjective analysts make it a focus of their approach to not be autocratic and not to assume that the analyst is always right. This avoids the posture of infallibility while preserving in its essentials the model that gives rise to it. For a discussion of a case treated from this model, see the third of the 4 analyses in the 2 analyses of Mr. Z plus 2. The paradigm is much too simple, too undifferentiated, to generate a way to talk to a patient about the experience the blanks speak of. Feeling abandoned by the therapist's unresponsiveness. In this explanatory model, the experience of feeling abandoned is treated as determined by unconscious forces. What the patient is conscious of is just a cover, a defense. Thus, the borderline structures are seen as by the Blancs simply as a form of ego deficit and hence as not analyzable, only repairable by corrective experience or just something that the therapist has to work around. The trouble with this conception is that if you think it is true, you have no way to find out that it isn't. Here is how the same problem, a patient's seeming inability, we kind of went on, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I'm just going to read it again, I guess. It's probably important to read it again. Here's how the same problem, a patient's seeming inability to cope with analytic reserve, looks in the ego analytic perspective. It is unlikely that such patients...
It is likely.
Thank you. It is likely that such patients think they are not supposed to feel abandoned. They might well feel ashamed of being so vulnerable. It also is likely that they would expect the analyst to be offended if this feeling is expressed. Further, they probably expect that to express feeling abandoned would be taken by the analyst as a demand or worse, as a complaint, not an unreasonable expectation. Given this expectation, the patient may already be angry, hence could only express it as an attack or a demand, and this would feel too dangerous. Any or all of this could be readily recognized by the patients or brought to their attention, as well as relieving to have it anticipated and understood. This picture is an example of analyzing, not psychoanalyzing. Oh, he said it. It should make it clear that the classical analyst's preoccupation with the drives was terribly distracting and non-productive. The neglect of patients' way of relating to their own experience is, in retrospect, truly deplorable. What I mean by deplorable is, again, the analyst and patient would be like any ordinary couple, each in their own world, the patient feeling ashamed and resentful about feeling abandoned, and the analyst thinking that the patient is stuck in this proverbial reliving of the unavailability of the mother in the separation individuation phase, and thus unable to stand the rigors of psychoanalysis. The conflict model made it difficult for the analyst to be empathic since he or she operated at such a distance from the patient's unconscious conscious. Unless your model prepares you to envision the patient's inner life, his relationship to himself, you cannot fully identify with him, and without that, the analyst's empathy is necessarily limited. Kohut himself provided an illustration of this. In his early work in the 50s with sites, Kohut published on the repression barrier, a concept that typifies id analytic thinking. The idea was, believe it or not, that psychoanalysis could proceed most fully only if the patient had a good, strong repression barrier. You may recall that I have already quoted the Blancs to that effect. Quote, often one of the most pressing problems in the psychotic or borderline psychotic is the failure of repression. Despite his insight into the unempathic effect of interpretations proceeding from the classical model, Kohut could easily revert to the most primitive version of this frame. Here is an example of that kind of thinking from his groundbreaking first book, The Analysis of the Self. It is a startling example of Kohut's continuing uncritical acceptance of id analysis, by no means the only such example, but the most extreme and revealing. Quote, there are, of course, moments in the analysis of some narcissistic personalities when a forceful statement will not come amiss as a final move in persuading the patient that the gratifications obtained from the unmodified narcissistic fantasies are spurious. A skillful analyst of an older generation, for example, as asserted by local psychoanalytic lore, would make his point at a strategic juncture by silently handing over a crown and scepter to his unsuspecting analysand, instead of confronting him with yet another verbal interpretation. So, Jared, can you picture that? Like the analyst like goes up to the patient on the couch and is like pantomimes like bowing and handing them the scepter. You can't see it. I did the gesture there.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, dude, your job as a psychotherapist or whatever, id analysis therapist, right?
Yeah, id analyst.
I thought the ego analysis one was the right one.
Yeah, it is. So he's saying, but yeah,
he's talking about an id analysis therapist.
Yeah.
Is to make the other person feel like you're giving them the scepter.
No, he's saying that was the id analyst's way of basically taking the patient down a notch, or giving him like popping his bubble, or telling him the harsh truth that he's like this tyrant who wants to be a king or something, by sarcastically giving him the crown and scepter. Okay, so
okay, I get it. So the id analyst is always trying to make the person
catch them up,
pretty much catch them up, make them feel humiliated.
Yeah, always catch them out on their BS.
And they think that making them feel humiliated helps them.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I mean that's the most low resolution, generalizable version, like way to say what id analysis is that, like, the way you help someone is by catching them up on their little sins and making them aware of their sins.
Well, does it? In a way it does, but not really, right?
There's definitely utility in pointing.
Well, I guess to different people, yeah, to different people, it had different effects on different people. But to strong people, they could take that and they could probably work with that to make it into something good.
I just think it's making it's using a hammer for everything and treating everything like a nail, or whatever the phrase is, you know.
Oh, like yeah. taking a hammer to the kneecap of a person who's paralyzed from the waist down.
Yeah. Well, that didn't work, but it didn't hurt, did it? No? All right. Yeah, it really looks like it would hurt if you could feel it.
I don't know why I made that example, like, because it probably would hurt. No, I was just saying like I was more saying so like someone who wouldn't be able to take that to work it into something good is someone who's like crippled, and it would be like taking a hammer to somebody who's crippled who couldn't even work with the thing that or I guess it wouldn't be like taking a hammer. It'd be like saying, all right, this is a better way of saying it. It's like, we're going to do a cliff jump. This is the most advanced. All right, guys, I know this is only your first day of cliff jumping, but we're going to do the most advanced thing in cliff jumping. We're going to jump over this giant gap with a 1,000-foot drop. Yeah. And there's like people in a wheelchair. Yeah. Like, all right, guys, let's go. Like wheeling them. Like, no excuses. I'm going to give you a running start. I'm going to roll you to a running start. Yeah. And you got to jump.
Yeah. Remember.
And they just fall off.
Remember, there's no excuses and no accidents.
But to everybody who's strong enough, they'd be able to make the jump just fine.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going here.
All right.
From the ego analytic perspective, this intervention is inconceivable since confrontation is no longer considered to be analytic. This intervention is conceivable, even prized as skillful, get thee of course, only when lifting repression is all that matters, id analysis. Notice that the analyst employs his practical joke rather than confronting him with yet another verbal interpretation, the implication being that the analyst was wearying of the use of verbal interpretations, of attempting to hammer his way through the barrier created by the patient's not being able to stand being called narcissistic. He surprised the unsuspecting patient with a move that the patient had no way to defend himself against or to argue with or even to grasp. After all, what was the interpretation? I kind of guessed at it there. Okay. The first thing that the ego analyst notices is the patient's difficulty arguing his case. People get defensive when they are unable to adequately defend themselves, or being able to say how all the verbal interpretations affected him. Yeah, noticing the patient's inability to say how how the analyst's interpretations are affecting them, right? Which is something that's universal. Have you noticed that, Jared? You kind of have to apply somebody's thoughts kind of about how something makes them feel or think. You kind of have to be a teacher about it and be like, all right.
That would be such a fucking fourth removed concept though to communicate though, that like I want to communicate how I'm feeling under the influence of the way that you're making me feel about a certain thing that I am going to explain to you under the influence of the way that you're.
It sounds like pointless fucking busy work, doesn't it? Or it sounds like some kind of like weird cult thing. Yeah, like I think I said this in the first episode that there's a way that that all
Have you heard of what's it called? It's called like soft language. It's called I can't remember what the guy's name is. It's called. It's like the language. I think it's called. That's so funny. I just remember it as soft language, but it's basically like it's a cult way of It's a cult way of talking that basically never places blame or attacks anybody, and always starts sentences with "I feel."
Yeah.
I feel you are da 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 da. Well, I feel that da 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 da. Yeah. And if you don't, and if you say anything beyond that, then everybody is within their right to correct you or to exercise self-defense like against you verbally, socially, rejecting you and isolating you, or you know what I mean, or like, or even some people even believe like physically, violently, you know, against non soft speak, whatever it's called, whatever the word is for it. I can't remember what it's called. There's this movement of this guy. There's a really relevant. I don't want to name drop her, but there's like a really relevant freedom movement person that fell for this trap a couple years back. I hope she doesn't still like think this way, like, you know. But
who was it?
I don't want to say it on stream, but
okay.
but she's basically like a nomad hippie kind of character, and I remember she wanted to like talk to me she wanted to like call me on Facebook Messenger one time, but then after having a text message conversation with her where like she was overly like trying to explain this soft speak like religion and the way that you're supposed to talk, and like me like you know, resisting it, that like she didn't want to talk to me over the phone after that. Like she got scared off pretty much because like I wasn't gonna talk like that.
That's funny. Like this, right?
I'm hearing that you feel a lot of
Wait.
you're in for it now, Dad.
Okay, here we go.
So from now on, I'm going to quit nagging and have more fun. Helen, did you eat my whole pan of brownies? You're in for it now, Dad.
Marge, I'm feeling a lot of shame right
I'm
now.
hearing that you feel a lot of shame.
I feel that you hear my shame.
I'm feeling annoyance and frustration, but also tolerance.
I feel validated by that.
Good. I'm glad we had this talk.
Me too.
That's great. That's a great Simpsons moment. Yeah, like zero accountability for your actions as long as
called Owning Your Okayness.
What the fuck? Yeah.
So good. Okay.
Yeah,
And-
people who think that it's okay to like pretty much do whatever the fuck they want as long as they're willing to talk nicely and softly to each other. Yeah, that's for you.
Yeah. So, exactly, and he talks about one of his little soapboxes that Apfelbaum goes on is all about how analysis is constantly trying to reinvent itself by.
Wait, so should we talk softly to ourselves in like these feeling terms?
I don't think it's necessary. Well, okay, so talking softly, like there's a.
That's actually the question that begs the question.
Okay, well,
that's the question that's begged from this whole.
I think you should have.
Should like because it is overly exhausting and cultish to and it makes everybody a fucking thought police or a fucking not a thought police, a word police. Yeah. And like it makes communication really fucking frustrating and stupid to have everybody be verbal policing each other on the way that instead of like appreciating the communication that you have, appreciating any form of authentic communication in whatever form it is, as long as it's non-violent, if it's authentic communication, it's valuable and it should be appreciated for what it is. And we should appreciate the way that parts of ourselves talk to each other, talk to ourselves that way. Right. When we talked, like I said, how mockery taught me. We mock ourselves internally. It's good for us.
Sometimes, but it can also be inappropriate. The thing is, you're supposed to look at the thing you do and reflect on it and decide if it was acting out or not. And like, so Yeah, it's not like there's-
Yeah, decide if it's and then put him in timeout for fucking 10 years.
Oh, just put yourself in timeout.
Put that part of yourself in timeout
right,
for
yeah.
whatever. That part's never gonna speak up for at least 10 years. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but it is like, yeah, when you judge yourself, Paul talks about how we ought to judge ourselves. If we don't want to be judged, we should judge ourselves. Like, you know, and like our conduct and our behavior, and put ourselves.
I think there should be free expression and communication, and like the way that we have kingship and dominion over the court of our own internal, you know, King Arthur's table inside of us. We don't have that same kind of dominion over other people. Okay, like that's something we gotta fucking. That's something a lot of people have a hard time coming to terms with. Huh?
I do.
They're like, no, I have dominion and control over every one of my friends, and I control everything that we talk about and say, and everything that we do is my decision, and everything. They are my pawns in my game. I am king in the court of my friends, or whatever. No, come on. You respect other people's agency and free will decisions, and you know what I mean. You respect other people's agency to be a good friend. So like it doesn't apply externally as it does internally. So like that's something that people have to come to terms with.
Letting people be authentic and communicate.
Letting people be authentic and have agency.
That's what you would want. It's the golden rule, kind of. Yeah, that's what you would want from them toward you. So anyway, so the first thing the ego analyst notices is this patient's difficulty in arguing his case or being able to say how all the verbal interpretations affected him. Apparently, the analyst just kept hammering away without finding out what the patient thought about his doing that. But the key point from the ego analytic point of view is that the patient's not being able to stand thinking of himself as narcissistic is the problem and necessitates defense. This was an extraordinary reversal in psychoanalytic thinking. In the original view, certain wishes are repressed because they conflict with universal standards. That approach was easily understood. The revised approach is difficult to understand, even especially so because the original approach is so lodged in people's minds. The best way to put the revised approach is to say that repression itself is the problem. Here's the idea. The narcissistic person, that is, the one we call narcissistic, is so condemnatory about being narcissistic. This comes out most clearly in his or her reaction to other narcissistic people that it is rigidly blocked from conscious awareness. If the person was more able to tolerate this motive, perhaps even enjoy it, then it could be consciously felt and consequently more flexibly and adaptively acted on. In other words, repression removes the wish or motive from conscious control, and it then is expressed without awareness, meaning compulsively and defensively. Compare the narcissistic sensitivity to slights. This is what it should mean to say as above, that bringing a conflict to consciousness then gives the person the opportunity to make choices. Although the word choice is unfortunate since it carries the self-responsibility ethic and actually undoes this insight, then meaning that the narcissistic person would in effect sober up. Yeah, that's really interesting. When the standards are taken for granted, the superego is invisible. I want to read that part again. When the standards are taken for granted, the superego is invisible. We all know that people defend against feelings or wishes because of superego strictures. What is
strictures, not structures?
Yeah, strictures. You don't know what a stricture is?
A mental structure?
No. I think it's like a binding cord. stricture is an abnormal narrowing of a bodily tube or passageway. Ah, it's an obstruction in a tube. So, superego stricture, it's an obstruction. What is not so obvious is why this was not obvious all along. Yeah, and in fact was an extraordinary discovery. The reason this point is so important is that even though we know that people defend against feelings or wishes because of superego strictures, we are often working from the old model without realizing it. Another way to say it is that we have not yet worked through this insight. Yeah, we just talked about this like earlier.
You know, it's really interesting that the standards make the superego visible. Basically.
Invisible.
No, visible, because it says without structures or without standards. Standards meaning
when the standards are taken for granted. Look.
When they're taken for granted, when they're not, when you forget about them. Okay, like, and standards have everything to do with hate, don't they?
Yeah.
So like people should be appreciative of their hate, and they should actually be like super like paying attention to what they hate, because their standards of things is what makes their internal relationships work. Okay, you need to have standards to have good internal relationships, people. And that's directly related to your hate of things. You need to hate stuff that's bad.
People
have standards.
People think that personal standards, when you ask somebody what personal standards are, you know what they'll usually say is like things that they don't tolerate in other people. It's funny. You're like, what are some of your personal standards?
Yeah, we're kind of saying two opposite things, huh? Have standard, but also allow people to have agency. Right? Aren't those two? Are those two? Contradictory ideas?
Here's what I'm
or
trying
or
to
can
get
people
at.
can
Here's what
people
I'm trying to
still
get at,
have
Jared.
standards
Jared,
and have
listen,
relationships with
listen,
people
Listen.
who
Person A says, person A asks.
Can you let me finish that thought?
I was about to finish the thought.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
People were, person. You say to somebody, like, you ask somebody what their personal standards are, and they say, well, I don't tolerate someone speaking to me disrespectfully. That's one of my personal standards, or whatever, right? They're like misunderstanding the concept, right?
Yeah, they don't,
because they don't.
Do they really hate people talking to them in a way that makes them feel disrespected?
But that's not what a personal standard is. A personal standard is this, Jared. It's what you don't tolerate yourself. You don't tolerate yourself to do. That's a personal standard. If you don't permit yourself to be disrespectful towards another person, that's a personal standard that you have. It's a standard you hold your own person to.
Yeah.
And the thing is, people don't have those, or don't recognize the ones that they have,
or that they hold other people to the same standards.
So I'm just trying to say, it's what he says in this first statement, which is, when the standards are taken for granted, the superego is invisible. When you ask somebody what their values are, and they start talking about all these things that they like and dislike, but they never are able to talk about that relationship they have with themselves, like those conversations that they've had with themselves, where they've had to say to themselves, I fucked up, or something like that, which people do. It's not like people, even the most low-life, unconscious person has done that at some point. It's just that, what do? They just fucking forget about it or something.
They do what?
Reflect at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to...
But we're reflecting upon their own standards of what they think is acceptable or not acceptable, right?
Yeah.
For themselves.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about...
But
the superego has something to do... The superego isn't just about the standards that you hold for yourself. It has to do with the standards you hold... The standards that you hold for yourself versus the standards that you hold for others.
And here's what I was going to say in response to that, Jared, is this. Like Paul said, if we were to judge ourselves, we wouldn't be judged or whatever. Like, if you were to actually consciously engage with the personal standards, discover the ones you have, discover the ones that you should have that shockingly you don't have, and the ones that you shouldn't have that you shockingly have, like, basically discover those things about yourself and change and decide and change what you want to change and things like that. By doing that, I think what happens, at least what's happened to me, is that I no longer feel like this intense need to manage other people, to have external standards. My requirement and my what's the word, my need for external standards to be kept and managed reduces when I've kept and managed my internal standards of myself.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So you're saying you're willing to forgive transgressions of your external standards that you hold for others.
Totally.
If you are holding to the internal standards that you hold for yourself.
It certainly becomes more possible and easier to do. That's for sure.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I wish that people, if people were more even aware of that, bringing consciousness and aware, what do they call it? Not just, what's the word that they used? Was it consciousness?
Well, there's awareness versus consciousness.
Yeah.
Right?
So consciousness is the reflection. If people would simply reflect on the standards that they're keeping internally, that they're holding internally to themselves, and we're aware of the fact that their discomfort and agitability level, their ability to be aggravated by others, is directly related to how disappointed or proud of themselves they are about holding their own personal standards.
Yeah.
They would be infinitely more embarrassed. They would be infinitely more embarrassed by the way that they act, and they wouldn't act the way that they would typically act in like a, crash out. Instead of crashing, they would have infinitely better crash outs. They would retreat. They would retreat to their fucking cave rather than make a fucking mockery of themselves, because they would feel humiliated 100 times quicker.
Yeah.
Which is the whole point of the first id analysis thing, making people feel humiliated. But that's the real way that people should feel humiliated, is when they realize.
That's so interesting.
When they realize
you
how
just brought it full circle. You really did. Wait, but continue. Can you finish that thought? So you said the real way.
The real way that people should feel humiliated is when they realize the relationship they have, that the relationship they have to themselves and holding to their own personal standards directly relates to their ability to forgive other people, the standards that they hold to other people. If they are being transgressed, then they would feel infinitely more humiliated by their crash outs and faster than they would without that reflection and awareness of that dynamic of like the standards they hold to themselves versus the standards they hold to others.
Yeah, he talks about how ego and analytic perspective gives you the ability to really to find a source of empathy, especially with somebody who is just totally in the wrong or like bad, or
because somebody when somebody feels. Think about this. This is a great way of verbalizing it and visualizing it for someone. the way that you feel when somebody else betrays you versus the way that you feel when you betray you.
Yeah.
It's when the way when someone else betrays you, you feel violent, you want to lash out violently. But when you betray you, you want to retreat into your fucking cave and curl up into a ball because you feel humiliated. Okay?
So here's
That's why you should feel humiliated faster.
Here's another like maxim or like insight of ego analysis that he talks about elsewhere in his essays is this. It's like the person who's made a victim of something needs obviously that person elicits our sympathy, right? The person who's made a victim of something, like, not their fault, right? But the person who has like victimized somebody else and then has like remorse for it, they need possibly more sympathy, not more like quantitatively, but like
more sympathy
great deal.
if they feel ashamed.
If they really are,
if they feel ashamed.
Who knows
But no, they don't. But in actuality, they don't.
But not more, but they do need
not
sympathy.
more.
They need sympathy.
They need
as well,
sympathy, but not
as
more.
well. Not more.
No,
but
not at all.
Sometimes more, because think about it. Like
more than the people that they hurt.
Because think about how the hurt, the even after like the injury might be short-lived and they might have like even paid the restitution for it, but their guilt stays with them, and that's like this longer duration of suffering.
Yeah, they have to live with that for the rest of their life.
Exactly.
If they're conscious aware of that, and you can tell that it's causing them like spiritual burden,
so do you
then
see
that's why people are more willing to forgive.
Do you see
if
in
that's
that
the
sense
case,
how that person could elicit even more like sympathy?
Not more.
Not more.
Not even that.
Yeah.
Not even more.
Yeah.
Because when you transgress theft, when you steal from somebody, you deserve everything.
Okay, I might have phrased it wrong. Let me phrase it again here, because it might be a little different.
Because people should.
It's like this. It's like
blame
this.
should
Sure.
be placed,
Talk
and
about,
people should like feel good about people getting what they deserve.
For sure. But Jared, wait. I think I might have phrased it a little bit wrong. Although I do agree that, like, yeah, if somebody's expressing true repentance, that no, they don't necessarily deserve more sympathy, but they do deserve sympathy. People like
they don't deserve sympathy.
Not deserve. I didn't mean that either. I'm getting a little sloppy. It does elicit sympathy.
Yeah.
To me,
Okay. Sure.
Me. Okay. Anyway, so let me say this though. How about this, Jared? Two different scenarios. One of them is that you're made a victim by somebody else, right? And then in the other scenario, it's you make yourself a victim. Like you were saying earlier, you cause yourself a whole lot of suffering. You kind of victimize yourself.
Yeah.
And
some people actually lash out to others instead of actually feeling. Because I should. People are crazy where they'll literally like violently lash out rather than curl up and feel ashamed.
Yeah. In that scenario, the person who victimizes themselves elicits more sympathy in me than the person who's victimized by somebody else. Not necessarily, just all things considered, yeah, like, I don't know, like, the specifics, but it seems like the person who's, like, just, like, hurts themselves and then is, like, has to live with that. It's, like, harder to live with that than just being hurt by somebody else. That's easier to live with. You can accept the injustice a lot easier. That, like, you know what I'm saying? Again, not with all things being equal.
In some ways, yeah. In some ways,
We're not talking about specifics.
with enough time, the injuries that you do to yourself last a lot longer. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's an ego analytic insight, I believe, because it's like you have to remember that people aren't just bad and stupid, they're also hurting themselves by, in this way. Anyway. Okay. So, When the standards are taken for granted, okay, I read that part.
And we're on that next paragraph.
Okay. We still tend to be in league with the superego, thinking that some contents are bad, childish, pathological, and that's why we have to confront patients with them. Going back to narcissistic patients, they alienate us, and we just think they are too narcissistic. So we silently condemn them and try to nudge them into seeing the error of their ways. This only reinforces their self-condemnations, which causes them to more forcibly repress this tendency or triggers narcissistic rage, or both. You sometimes hear it said that therapists cannot help communicating their values to patients. This understates the case. In an unknown number of instances, it is the whole of the therapy. Working our way out of moralizing is the next task of the psychological revolution. So we tell the patient, you want to control the hours, or you are afraid of intimacy. And we expect the patient to defend against these tendencies because, as everyone knows, they are bad. And we feel if we can just prove to patients that they are like this, they will correct it, will work on it. But what we have actually done from the ego analytic point of view is to make the patient feel bad about these tendencies, that is, to increase ego intolerance. Which brings us to the question, what does it mean to weaken or strengthen a defense? It's interesting how he says up here that id analysis is in league with the superego. What do you think about that, Jared?
In league with?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's not putting it quite right. But
Isn't in and out. Oh. Okay, I see what you're saying. Because it's about ultimately it's about finding standards, and standards means feeling humiliation.
Because remember, Jared.
Did you hear what I said about feeling humiliation?
Exactly. Standards, humiliation. The relationship we're talking about with ourselves, that isn't the superego. It's the relationship between the ego and the superego. And I suppose you could say also also the relationship between all three parts, but it's that recognition of that relationship as opposed to the superego in itself is like the thoughts and beliefs and attitudes and like standards and rules and expectations and like that are all socially sort of they all have like a social aspect to them for sure, but they also have a personal aspect to them, right? And like we were talking about the personal standards versus external standards and things like that, and like but it's like, yeah, I was just saying it's interesting. I'm pointing out here that that it's not that the thing that the thing when we say that the superego is invisible, if we take our standards for granted and things like that, the superego, that's actually kind of weird. It represents the relationship that we have with ourselves, but also like it's the thing with which you're having a relationship.
You're relating this back to God?
Not necessarily. No,
Well, it depends. You're saying depends on the whether the person that you're having a relationship with.
No, more like the superego. It's both the relation. Maybe I'm getting a little tired, but let's finish this section, okay?
Okay,
Finish
yeah.
this section.
Finish the section, and then we'll continue on part 3.
Okay.
Got some
Sounds
good insights here to work with.
Okay.
Don't skip over it. Start where we were.
No, this was where we were at, but I think I'll stop here actually. Yeah, we stopped right here.
Well, can you reread that last part? Let me read that last, or let me read the last two paragraphs.
Okay, so we tell the patient you want to control the hours or you are afraid of intimacy, and we expect the patient to defend against these tendencies because, as everyone knows, they are bad, and we feel if we can just prove to the patients that they are like this, they will correct it, will work on it. But what we have actually done from the ego analytic point of view is to make the patient feel bad about these tendencies. That is to increase ego intolerance, which brings us to the question, what does it mean to weaken or strengthen a defense? We'll leave it there.
Yeah, what does it mean to weaken or strengthen a defense?
Next time, very soon on Mentally Illust Radio.
You got something to close us out with?
Something to close us out with on Mentally Illust Radio.
Sam's feeling tired.
Something to close us out with on Mentally Illust Radio. Something to close us out with.
You should open that as a backdrop.
Okay, well.
Right click it.
I'm just gonna look for a song over here. I'm just gonna look for a song.
As we take you inside the bathroom to the mirror the mirror cabinet, like the mirror cabinet, and we bring your face to the mirror and we push the mirror cabinet up to your face so that you see a million versions of yourself. We're bringing you to that realm next time, to be alone with yourself, looking in the mirror with 15 or 16 versions of you staring back at yourself, and having a conversation about standards that you have with yourself versus the standards you have with others, and how well you're ready to own up to your 15 other selves staring back at you saying, "What the fuck, bro?" Or they're saying, "Good job, man," depending on how good you are at holding to your own standards, which is also the way that you will be most likely to be either forgiving or humiliated to other people's transgressions or your own crash outs toward others. So something to keep in mind. That's some good that's some really good insight in life, I would say.
brings you to Walgreens today, Mr. Evans?
Well, I'm hosting a little spades game tonight. And you know when I get it going, I put my whole arm into slapping that card down on the table. So I need something for my joints. Gotta keep this arm loose.
Okay, gotta watch out for you. Joint support aisle 5.
Make the most of your Medicare Advantage OTC benefits. Just ask your Walgreens pharmacist about eligible items like joint support.
You gotta wind it up and you hit it like, ah!
A fuller life deserves fuller care. Walgreens.